Hey, welcome everybody. This is IMC's Voice of the Coalition. I'm Bill DeCourcy, the president of the IMC, and joining me, as always, is our co-host, Chris Michelson, who serves on the IMC's board. Today, we're digging into something that everybody in the industry is feeling right now. The Medicare ecosystem is shifting fast across carriers, regulators, and distribution, and staying aligned keeps, frankly, getting harder in a more complex, more compliance-driven world. So, to help us do that and to figure out what we need to do next, I'm glad to welcome our guest, Gary Culp, who's the Vice President of Government Markets at Blue Shield of California, where he leads their Medicare, their Medi-Cal, and their individual and family plan business. Gary brings a perspective that is truly tough to find. Before stepping into the carrier seat, he spent years on the distribution side, including Chief Distribution Officer for Cigna's Medicare business. So he's seen this alignment challenge from both sides of the table. Gary, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's get into our conversation.
Sounds great. Thanks. And thanks for having me today.
You bet.
Hey, Gary, it's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us. Before hopping in, just I think giving everybody a little bit of background on, your career, where you come from, how you started, and, what your goals are now in this new role is a good probably a good backstory to kicking off the rest of the combo.
Sounds great. I actually started on the provider side. So I was working for a medical group and an integrated system in Southern California and doing all sorts of work around their back office, front office, and also the way that they were transacting in terms of quality care. So got to see the inside behind the provider walls, if you will, and then, moved to the carrier side and have between United Healthcare, Aetna, and Cigna prior to joining Blue Shield of California, really just kind of decades of experience, mostly in the government space with a, kind of super focus on Medicare, but also working in commercial and national accounts as well. So kind of a broad experience between provider, distribution plan, building plans, so expanding Medicare programs across the nation, and also working on distribution, really in all levels of distribution, carrier distribution, as well as, broker agency and FMO and online distribution as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that background. I actually have a really funny story about Gary that I want to hop into. So we were building technology a few years back when Gary was at Cigna, and I had a chance to meet him and his team at, I think it was the Medicarians like 3 years ago at this point, if I'm correct. And Gary's definitely got like a presence to him. But I swear, we stepped out of the little conference meeting room that we were in, and I walked away. I came back. He was standing by himself. Typical guys walk up to say, "Hey, thanks. It's nice to meet you. What'd you think? Blah blah blah." In a 5 or 6 minute conversation that Gary and I have, I swear, hand to God, that at least 5 people came up to Gary and just like, "Gary, thank you. You're the greatest. You're the greatest leader I ever worked for. You're my favorite boss I ever had. I'm so happy to see you." And I'm just like, dude, who is this guy? He's like the greatest human alive. So, and I've been fortunate to stay in touch with him over the years, and can definitely attest he is a genuinely good human and wants what's best for the industry. So, I'm happy to see you in the role that you're in, and aligning with the government market still. And again, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insights.
Absolutely. And Chris, thanks for that. Not expected, but it makes me laugh. Actually, honestly, there's so many great people in this industry. And one thing that makes, I think, the government markets in particular different is that it's not just caring for people, it's caring for people that really have need. And so it tends to attract, people that are deeply committed, kind of committed to the community and the customers or members that they're actually helping or serve as well. So I know that even from the distribution side, agents are really thinking about it from a client relationship perspective. And I think that brings like the best out of people as well.
I think you're right about that, Gary. It's part of the ethos of the IMC, as a matter of fact, is, we're very much a beneficiary and client first organization looking out for what's best for those people who frankly need these programs more than your typical health insurance customer. So, we talked at the top of this about alignment, right? And you've seen it from both sides, as I mentioned in the introduction. You've been on the distribution side. Now you're with the carrier. Like, top 3 things where you think that alignment is needed. Just give us an overview of where you think that there's some disconnect between the provider side of things and the carrier side of things and the distribution side of things? Where do we need to get more aligned?
Sure. So, I think there's a couple of things to kind of think about, and that's that as many businesses or, objectives of trying to solve for healthcare across, large populations, there's been a considerable amount of change and shift. And I would say the first thing is that we moved from or are moving from more of a transactional system where we're looking at how to provide benefits and coverage for customers to more of an accountable end-to-end across carriers, regulators, distribution partners, providers. And really the way I look at that is that there's multiple legs to the stool that have to coordinate together to keep it steady. And that's something that all of us are kind of, committed to and kind of working on from a stakeholder and a system, and making sure that we're working well together in terms of delivering the right outcomes. I think there's also a couple of themes that are, kind of what I would say are emerging within 27 in particular. The first one is, kind of moving from the process to outcomes, and CMS has simplified parts of the star ratings to focus on clinical performance. The second is a strong push on affordability. And this is a word that I know that we've been using for years in healthcare because everyone's looking for affordability and access to care and quality care, but it really is an underscore kind of going into this, next cycle, if you will, and especially through programs like the Part D redesign and out-of-pocket caps. And then I would say the third thing is broader simplification and reduced administrative burden and more flexibility for plans. And that's a constant kind of, focus in terms of how we need to look at it from a, delivery of our products and systems too.
That's a very sophisticated view of things too, and this is why we were so anxious to get Gary on the program, because he has this kind of perspective and the ability to distill down the complex things that are happening here with alignment into concepts that we can all grasp and that we can all get behind. Chris, I think that you had a question.
Yeah, I was just writing down some notes on this. So, I think one of the things that you said that really resonated with me is when you said moving from process to outcomes, because that's a repeated theme that I hear talking to carriers, talking to the larger organizations in our space. I'd say we'd all agree that, the last 5 to 7, maybe even 5 to 10 years have been just sell the policies, right? Grow, 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 grow. Well, now you've got a lot of groups out there who are like, we actually lose money on every Medicare registration that we have, so we don't actually want to grow. We want to actually make this a better process for everyone involved. And I think it's kind of forced a lot of groups to take a step back and sort of reevaluate the processes in which they, the plans are constructed, the way that these plans are sold, the way that they're working with, their marketing teams, their marketing partners, and their distribution partners. Not to put you on the spot or ask you for anything too specific, what do you think one of the biggest changes in process that you've been a part of thus far, Gary? Like if you were to take a step back and just say, over the last 12 to 18 months, one key process that you've seen not just change but actually work.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties to your comments around how the industry has shifted. So we've shifted from, growth as being the priority. And don't get me wrong, growth is important. It's part of the engine that makes all this work, because all of us operate from a, customer base that requires growth. The difference is, though, is that it really shifts more towards sustainability and trust. And I think in, prior years, we even saw it from even a marketing perspective. So if we think of it from, where we were, let's call it 5 years ago, roughly, and the number of, TV ads kind of driving any type of shiny penny message, to today, where the messages are a little bit different in that they're focused on the value, the quality, the trust, the sustainability for long term, is kind of a great example of where we're seeing this shift happen. And so for, kind of my last, let's call it 18 months, has been working with, even on the distribution side, ways that we're making sure that we have that kind of focus. And so if I look at just one, kind of distribution channel of, national call centers, there was a point in time where their operating model was roughly 95% of their licensed agents were in the seat to answer phones and sell. Now they're split at a minimum of like 50-50, and some are even putting more in their kind of lifetime value and relationship with the client to ensure that they're actually keeping a sustainable and trusted relationship with them. And so the staffing has even been split to where that focus is an ongoing focus. And it's one that is also, coordinated with the carriers too around quality metrics. So, working with health risk assessments and getting information early to be able to take action as a carrier and help, people navigate certain kind of health issues or things that they might need help with. So I think there's, several things that are good examples, but that is probably one that I'd say in the most recent kind of cycle has been a double down in terms of focus and how we can actually help in terms of the overall performance.
I think of those of us who are on the pure performance marketing side of things, maybe who came from outside this business as I did, can really appreciate what you just talked about, especially at the national call centers, distributing more of their staff from the pure sales side to the retention side. Because, of course, with any customer relationship, your priority shouldn't exclusively be on closing the sale. It should be on the sustenance of that relationship. And there's no more important relationship that needs to be sustained than the one between a beneficiary and who they reach out to for help, whether or not it's the carrier, whether it's the provider network, or whether it's the agent to answer those questions. So I say rah, rah, here when it comes to more people putting more energy into LTV type of programs for retention, so that that relationship can nurture the beneficiary and blossom over time and be something that they find true value in. So, huzzah for that. I just want to remind our audience who's listening in, and I'm glad to see that we have a large audience gathering here. Please submit your questions to either myself or Gary or to Chris in the chat, and if it's selected, we'll feature it up on screen, and we'll get a live answer for you here.
Yeah, I want to touch on the LTV point. Gary, I guess it's probably been a few months at this point. Bill and I actually hosted a Voice of the Coalition where we specifically discussed the change in like understanding on the distribution side. I think that as this industry exploded, there were a lot of like net new people into the industry, right? People who came from non-traditionally insurance sales backgrounds were suddenly thrust into this explosion of Medicare sales in our country. And so people had a very kind of high level understanding of the metrics that really, I guess, should be included in the success of a policy being sold, right? The key being, what's the LTV of this policy, right? That's where everybody really nets the financial rewards in terms of like from a business enterprise standpoint. And from a consumer standpoint, if somebody stays on a policy for a long time, it's probably because they're happy with it, right? So that's a good metric of like consumer happiness and consumer approval. The LTV drops over the last 4 years have been insane, like substantial, going from an average, $1,500, $1,600 CPA or LTV from like an agency standpoint. I know that the carrier metrics are a bit different just based on claims and usage and whatnot, but to me, it seems like, if we don't collaborate unilaterally from carrier, distribution, agent, consumer on fixing the LTV problem, there's going to be a real challenge with sustainability around like Medicare distribution, period. Right? I mean, they've gone from like $1,500, $1,600 LTV at the agency level down to like $650 at the agency level. It's a huge drop off. What are moves that like you've built for your team? I don't know if you're as deep into the distribution as you used to be at Cigna, but so maybe not you or colleagues of yours. What are moves that you guys are working on internally and with your distribution partners in order to help extend that LTV metric out?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's an ongoing. So there's no one point in time of a kind of silver bullet, if you will, that kind of solves for this. There's multiple different levers, but at the top of that, it's around member experience. So what's the member experience in terms of how they're working with their agent, whatever that agent is? If it's across the kitchen table, if it's in a community center, if it's over the phone, or if it's online, whatever that experience is, how are they seeing it? Do they feel like they understand what they have actually opted for? Is there a relationship? And we're trying to help is ensuring that we're building that relationship with the carrier as well, so that you've got the pull through where we look like we're partners in the market working together. So that as the agent is bringing in the new customer, client, beneficiary, we're kind of taking it from there and helping them navigate their care. But then in conjunction, trying to coordinate messaging, marketing, contacts. So, for example, the other thing is there's a need for coordination here, because if you think about the beneficiaries, they're already getting overloaded with communications just based on their eligibility of whatever program they're eligible for and the care in the areas that they're in. So marketing all the time and communications all the time. Well, as we add a layer of, we've got their provider, we have their broker agent, we have the carrier, and each of which are also reaching out. The more we coordinate, the less confusion it creates, as well as less abrasion, because many people are kind of also saying uncle to communications and they don't get the message because it's just too much.
Mm-hmm.
So a really key thing here is coordination across distribution with carrier to ensure that we're not duplicating, which is inefficient, and that our messages are consistent so that it doesn't create confusion. And that's where we're spending a lot of attention is, really coordinating those messages together, and not just what the message says, but the timing and approach to delivery, so that we're ensuring that the message is received and it's one that's really with the right intent for both parties.
And I think that's an excellent initiative. And I'd love to hear more about that as it comes to fruition. Of course, me sitting on the distribution side, I would love to know how outside of the IMC that I could potentially assist with that, because you're right. I mean, even as a middle-aged guy who has insurance that is not provided through a broker, but is provided through my employer. I mean, if I go to the doctor, I mean, I'm a fairly intelligent person. Chris would say otherwise, but that's just his opinion. I mean, explanations of benefits, things that are in the app for my carrier, things that are in the app from my employer, things that are in the app from the provider network that I'm using. It is a little like, I call it, everyone calls it this information overload, right? At some point I have to say to myself, how important is it that I look into this? And in some cases it's pretty darn important that I do look at it, but maybe I don't look at it as much as I should. And then as you age, as you get a little older, maybe you're a little bit more vulnerable. Maybe you're not understanding things like we used to. The question then becomes, do the messages get more complex at that point? And I would argue that they do. And that isn't servicing anybody's best interest. So like I said, I would love to know more about this idea of coordinating and consolidating logically the messages that are being sent out, so that beneficiary experience can be made as good as possible.
It's I appreciate the kind of collaborative intent here too, because it really takes the parties having open communication and understanding what each are trying to do and how we can coordinate together. So in the example of communications, for example, we have worked with distribution partners where we look at what their cycle is in terms of communications and materials and outreach that they're making. So for example, if you think about different times of the year, there's areas where it makes sense for certain topics. So annual enrollment period is a good time to do benefit checks and confirming any changes in health needs, access to providers, medication changes that may look at formularies differently in the upcoming cycles, those types of things. And then during the actual enrollment period is having the conversation around what changes may need to occur to be able to solve for what those changes have been in their health or needs. But then you move to kind of soon after the first of the year, and it's more engagement around, have you had your annual wellness check? Do you know what your benefits are and how we can help you? Do you need help in terms of setting up your mail order pharmacy for ease of delivery? I mean, there's so many different things that we can help, but when we do it together and we have a consistency around the messaging, all the better, because whether it be the agent reaching out, the plan, or both, if it's consistent and it's kind of at the same timing that aligns, then all the better. So Bill, bottom line is that we're actually taking our timelines for communications, having conversations with our key distribution partners, of asking them for the same thing, particularly around the lifetime value of the client and how they're trying to engage with them, to ensure that our messaging, really coordinates together and is connected in terms of how we're doing it.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
I see that we have a question that's been submitted. I can't read it because my eyes are terrible and my monitor is 6 feet away. But I'm just going to go ahead and throw it up on screen and hope it's not offensive. And no, it's Todd Villeneuve, my best frenemy from Integrity down in Dallas. He's saying here in Minnesota, all of the providers offering an MA, we're going into 2026 at negative $150 plus. PMPM, they got the reimbursement rate up, but nowhere near what they need. What do you see needs to change first to curb these losses and get the access to using commissions as a lever off the table? Really good question, Todd.
Great question, Todd. Thanks for raising it. So, the entire kind of healthcare ecosystem is part of the solution here. It's not one thing. So I'll explain a couple of things that I mean by that. So on the provider side, it's really working on the quality and performance and how we're actually managing care and assisting patients in terms of navigating care for the right outcomes. Those right outcomes actually will drive, stronger retention, a greater, propensity to health, things that will make a difference in terms of the overall ecosystem. On the carrier side, it is a continual focus on efficiency, process improvement, operational improvement. And when we think about what era we're in right now with technology just exploding in terms of capabilities, I can't tell you how many things I'm either looking at or already using to help improve our efficiency as a carrier. So I know many, use ChatGPT often or cloud or other sources today to help in terms of assist what you do with your business. And if you think about the ways that you're using it today, of how much time you use with Claude, for example, versus what you would use as a company or as an agent to do that, you're, cutting the time, if not in half, probably by more in most instances. So as a carrier, also looking at technology in terms of how to improve the, member experience, improve the efficiency, and make it to where the dollars that we're getting are working in the way that is going to be the most effective outcome in terms of the member experience and our ability to do it. On the agent side, it kind of goes back to our conversation already this morning, which is focusing on the lifetime value, the relationship and trust with the actual, beneficiary is a key focus there. If we take all those and put them together, there are dollars that could be saved with all actions that can help in terms of the overall program sustainability and affordability. I would also say that, as an industry, to get kind of the visibility for growth over the last couple of, I would say cycles, the focus has been on what's the new shiny penny. So what is it that we actually can offer in benefits to, create an interest in the market for new customers to actually join. And while I appreciate the shiny penny concept, because I think it also forces innovation, it's looking for solutions that are different or unique from what we're doing today to try to improve. I think it also has come at the cost of where a lot of these programs are not being used. They don't have they're not showing the right type of outcomes in terms of the value for what the spend is to actually have them. So I think another, place is that as an agent, look at the quality and sustainability of the plan and less about the shiny penny. And as a carrier, same thing. It's like, what can we do to create the sustainability and long term and put the shiny pennies in place where those benefits are going to show demonstrated outcomes, utilization, and performance that are going to drive to the retention, the member experience, and the overall outcome in terms of their health.
I think all of us dream of a scenario in the future where the marketing, the advertising, the informational material that's going out isn't about the shiny penny, as you say. And we've all seen real examples of that, and we've all seen real bad examples of that. But rather talks about the health outcomes from these different plans, from real utilized services, not those things that are thrown on knowing that very few people are going to take advantage of it. If they do take advantage of it, may not have an impact on the outcome. Chris, did you have another question that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, speaking of just, shiny penny, I'm pretty sure that at one point, I don't remember who it was, so I'm not going to name names, but there was a plan out there that offered like a country club benefit. It was like a golf benefit, and I was just like, I remember thinking to myself, a lot of these phone calls I hear, I'm not so sure these guys are going out and golfing too much, but to Gary's point, it's like making it. There is no one solution, right? So thank you for pointing that out, because I think that that's the easy go-to is just how do we fix it? So it's just got to be this one thing, or it's got to be that one thing, and it's just not. There's so many different angles of approach here on how to resolve the. I mean, CMS has been very clear with what their expectations are now, and like what they're not happy with, and what they want to stop happening. While you were talking,
I'm sorry.
No,
I was going to say, this all underscores the need for coordination and collaboration.
Right.
So it really is about how do we work together to solve for the issue. So, the Minnesota example with the $150 gap is a real business issue, and it impacts everyone. It impacts the sustainability of the carrier. It impacts the provider in terms of, access as well as cost. It impacts the agent. But the worst part of it is it impacts the member or the client customer. So this is one where, really great, Todd, thanks for raising it, because this is at the heart of what our challenge is as an industry that we all need to work together to solve for, because it is, really all of us working together to help it.
And the communication between our organizations and the communications with the honestly, the most vulnerable constituency of our government, right, of our neighbors, are the people who are on Medicare plans. Like, let's call it what it is. And so while you were talking about that, I was thinking about communication with seniors, because I had recently read a stat that made me like borderline depressed, just sad, and thinking about how do you solve for this communication with seniors. I'm going to give you guys a stat real quick. The average senior spends 45 to 50 hours a week by themselves, even if they live with other people. A senior who lives by themselves and lives alone spends over 70 hours a week by themselves, completely isolated. So communication is so important, right? I mean, like being alone that many hours on a weekly basis. Listen, some of us, I don't mind getting out in the woods every now and then and spending some time by yourself, but like it's damaging if you do that for too long. And you're talking about people who, in a lot of cases, probably have some critical needs that they have to have sorted out. That's probably why this borderline abuse of marketing has taken place for so long. I mean, KFF just did a research study on Medicare ads. You want some jaw droppers real quick?
Yeah.
During peak seasons, about 650,000 Medicare ads run on air with both national and local TV. About 85% of those airings promote a Medicare Advantage plan. So 650,000 ads across national and local TV, and 85% of them are Medicare Advantage ads. That's an insane level of saturation. During the 9-week period of open enrollment, television alone averages 9,500 Medicare Advantage ads per day. And additionally, nearly half of all seniors polled receive 7 or more unsolicited phone calls, emails, or direct mail pieces every single week. So what does that tell me? That tells me we sure as heck know how to communicate with seniors for sure, because that's what we're doing. How do we incentivize the communication to be more productive, more holistic, less pushy, less spammy, right? Like promising endless freebies when it's like 0.1% of the country actually qualifies for that. And how do we shift the ability to communicate and get in front of these seniors to promote health, wellness, care? Where am I going with all this? Glad you asked, Gary. Thank you. Does this new CMS access plan help us maybe get to that at some point?
So before I go there, I do want to just make a quick comment too about some of the statistics and things that you were sharing, because I think it ties to even the question that we already received, and that's, imagine that 650,000 ads that are playing, the dollars that are associated with them, and it might be in the Kaiser Family Foundation information as well. But imagine what those dollars are, and not to say that we can do this business without marketing, because reality is we need to market. Some of it is getting reach to people that may not be aware of what's available or how to get to it. But there's got to be a way from a coordination perspective, if we use that $150 gap that was referenced in terms of the state challenge for Medicare Advantage, and say how much of that $150, if we were to coordinate between carrier and distribution partner, could be solved in terms of reducing that gap as one of the actions that could be taken to help in terms of sustaining the agent model and the carrier relationship, as well as the performance overall. So thanks for bringing that one up, Chris. And then for the access model, I think a couple of things I would say is that I'm actually excited about the access model in the sense that we're shifting toward stronger engagement and outcomes versus just enrollment. And that's, part of what is intended by all this anyway. But if I look at just Blue Shield of California as an example, we're already moving in this direction. We're providing higher touch support to help members navigate care. We're supporting key life transitions like retirement. We're offering tools that make the system feel simpler and more predictable. And Bill, you talked about like technology and ease a little bit earlier. And one of the things that kind of even speaks to the technology piece as an example, our Blue Shield of California app is actually rated at 4.4 on the Apple App Store, out of the 5-star rating. So it speaks to how people are using it. Now, granted, we all know that there's various profiles of our beneficiary population, but for those that are really profiled for tech savvy, ease of use, or have caregivers that are looking for that as well, using simpler and more, easier access to tools like an app as an example are something that could be very helpful. And also, not only add to the kind of the access, the experience, and how people think about the plan, but also around the cost effectiveness too, because a lot of what is, taken care of in an app environment could be a phone call to a call center, which is a cost, could be, materials that are sent in paper, which is a cost. I mean, there's things that actually help in terms of the use of technology as an example.
Yeah.
Your group has been like probably the most vocal about access, and I'll be honest, I learned about it from one of your posts, so thank you for being one of the leaders there. As I've discussed, and it's crazy, like as I've discussed it with others, no one really knows what's coming with that, or how it operates, or how it functions. Do you think you could give us like a 2-minute, 5-minute debrief just on like what the access plan is, what it means for all of us, and just like from your perspective, how you think it's going to operate for, keeping in line with the unification of the groups? Because when things change for carriers, they tend to change for distribution, right?
Right. So I think for, from an access model perspective, there's a couple of things that are really foundational that help in terms of the success of it. So one is around the data integration and timeliness. So knowing that the access model relies on kind of the near real-time insight into patient risk, utilization, and outcomes. Many organizations are still working or lagging in a fragmented data system. So when you think about the overall program's intent of really trying to drive better outcomes at the beneficiary level, it requires a much stronger data integration and timeliness. And this isn't absent in the distribution space either. So I know I mentioned around health risk assessments earlier. Imagine from a data perspective, if an agent truly spent the time dedicated to asking the questions and ensuring the answers are as accurate as possible, working with the beneficiary. As a plan, if this if this potential member was coming through the annual enrollment period for a January 1st effective, we would likely get that health risk assessment data sometime in the fourth quarter to be able to start taking action in terms of stratifying where is there disease management programs that might align to this particular customer, where is there case management that we may need to coordinate with a prior plan, where is there information that we can gather to share with the provider to ease in terms of the transition in terms of their care model. It's access in total is kind of keeping an eye on getting better quality outcomes as kind of the output, but the steps that we can take in between are critical. And another thing is around provider alignment and incentives. So we have been working in the space of value-based care for a long time and across really all lines of business. So it's not exclusive to Medicare. These are relationships with integrated provider systems in terms of driving kind of quality and outcomes across all lines of business. And what that does is a couple of things. One, it creates the coordination and collaboration between the plan and the provider and the member. It also is managing metrics. So looking at what is best in class, how are we performing, what is it that we need to do to try to improve that performance. It also puts some incentives in place that actually keep both aligned. So it creates where doing the right thing gets the right outcome. The last is around kind of capabilities at the front line. So I kind of call this the warm hug. I think to really be successful in any type of quality and outcome is how close you are to the beneficiary and the member. And the way that we do that is how we can create the relationship and what I call warm hug. It could be at the agent level in terms of that regular check-in. You mentioned the, horrible kind of, statistics around the potential loneliness and, a senior population not having interaction with folks as frequently as, maybe a non-senior population. And agents certainly could help in that. But also, like from a Blue Shield perspective, we look at it as kind of how do we create high-touch support models for the senior population to help them. One of which is a care navigator who guides members through really complex situations. They can support in terms of scheduling follow-ups, benefit navigation, and understanding of those benefits. They can also help in terms of looking at what are the things that are going to be more whole person in terms of what their needs are. So every individual has a different need. For example, some may not, drive or may not have transportation, and helping them coordinate in terms of transportation to get to and from a, provider visit, really important. Or some, may, really enjoy staying fit and healthy and having fitness programs or community support. So there's really no stone left unturned in terms of care navigation, but really creating that hug from a carrier perspective in conjunction to what an agent can do or providers can do as well. But I think access at this core is really how do we drive better outcomes for the beneficiary.
I love that. It's so refreshing to hear change like this. It really is, right? Like you know me at this point, man. We've had a lot of combos about how I feel. I'm not gonna go down and stand on that soapbox again. I think everybody at IMC is probably nauseous already when I get on that hill. But it is just so refreshing to hear from I don't want to say from your side, because I feel like we are all on the same side, but from your vantage point of this industry, how much that means to you. I think the care coordinator concept is brilliant. I think it's so needed. Healthcare is so confusing. There are so many loopholes. Um, I don't know if you know this or not, but like groups like Uber, they have medical ride assistance as part of their app as well. Saved my butt a couple times when I was going through chemo myself. So it's like one of those things where, I can see a future where, we're to your point about just technology exploding, where we're seeing all these different technology applications working together with, I don't know, call it crazy, the goal of taking care of the most vulnerable group of people in our country, right? Like what a novel concept. Gary, just thank you for being on the forefront of that
Yeah.
and building that out. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for being one of the good guys, and there's this, that's what the IMC is all about, is collecting those good guys and good people and good women together to learn from one another and to reinforce the things we want to reinforce. A IMC Voice of the Coalition podcast would not be complete without a question from Farzin.
I love how, by the way, I love how the questions cut off our guest's face every time.
I'm gonna if okay, just for those behind the scenes, like here, you know what? Doink.
Much better. Thank you.
I have great power. Although, as you'll see, I dropped off for a minute because my computer literally just crashed right in the middle of what was going on.
I was like, dude, we finally figured out how to get rid of Bill. I was like, Gary's the answer there. That's
Gary's the answers. Always have a backup computer ready to go when you're doing one of these things. All right. So Farzin Esfahani says, you've talked a lot about alignment and LTV. How does that play out specifically in rural markets? Great question. Yeah. Where there may be only a handful of providers and limited distribution infrastructure. What role do you see for carriers, regulators, and distribution partners to jointly address rural network adequacy and cost pressure so these communities aren't left behind as the MA economics tighten? I mean, we've seen this everywhere, right? I mean, this is this over the last 20 years has become a big question in specialty care and hospital networks, right? Where rural options have increasingly disappeared in certain areas, and you've literally got some healthcare deserts in parts of the country. I have some friends who live in the Mountain West who, to get not even specialized treatments, but sometimes for things like I need to get, a mammogram or something like that, 2-hour drive. It's crazy. So how do we keep that from happening in the MA space?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a true challenge for sure. I would say a couple of things here. One is on there's kind of a theme and kind of comments for today in general, and that's collaboration, because this in particular is a key in terms of collaboration. So it's a collaboration with, in most instances, the state, sometimes the feds, depending on geography, depending on what the solution is that we're trying to provide, but really staying tight with regulators in terms of what we're doing in each of these geographies, how we can help assist in terms of providing solutions. The other is around providers. And so in some of the rural areas, there is some sophisticated, delivery systems, but some don't have the same density or sophistication as maybe some of the metropolitan areas. And if I use so we're Blue Shield of California, if I use Southern California as an example, there is like incredible, examples of what models of care and how we can drive better outcomes. So actually, helping the providers as well. So we have the division of Blue Shield of California, for example, called Alteus, that provides provider insights, tools, and resources to help providers really improve quality and outcomes and operate in a more efficient way. So that's another kind of tool or resource we can use in rural areas to assist with rural providers and systems that may not have that sophistication or the technology or tools to help in terms of managing a population. On the distribution front, this is one where, being directly connected with plans and helping in terms of understanding where the challenges are from a distribution partner perspective, where we can help, whether it be communications, access to care, those types of things. And then I think from a carrier perspective too, and this is one that I have a strong belief in, it's really ensuring that you have solid portfolio. because there isn't a one size fits all for all situations. And so I'm a strong proponent of Medicare Advantage. My 3 remaining fortunate parents are all on Medicare Advantage, but I have other family members that are better suited for a Medicare supplement or other options because of where they live, what is the best, care options for them, what type of access they have. So I think portfolio is important too. I would say and I know this question wasn't specific to California, but I'm going to use it as an example because I think this is an industry need in terms of mission. If you're in the government space, you really need to have the mission of how to solve for everyone. This is not a space to really solve for specific, cohorts, if you will. So looking at Blue Shield of California, for example, the mission includes a statement around providing affordable healthcare and access to all Californians. That statement is pulled through in terms of our business model too. So when we look at our government program suite, we have the individual family plans available literally in every zip code in the state of California. We are one of the few ACA individual family plan options in the country that offer a statewide every zip code in terms of offering. Our Medicare supplement, #1 for the state in terms of size, and it is obviously in every zip code across the state. Medicare Advantage, we have it in all the markets that we can operate in today, and continuing to look at expansions to offer Medicare Advantage across the state as well. So I think there's a portfolio piece here. I think there's a mission piece. I think there's a provider piece in terms of sophistication and quality. And then obviously on the distribution side, it's staying engaged with provider and plan in terms of local community as well.
That was a deep and sophisticated answer. I really appreciate your knowledge base. It's so great to have conversations that are so informative and like it leads to discovery, right? And so a couple of the points that you mentioned, I just want to loosely touch on because Bill and I have had former coalition, voice of the coalition conversations. Bill, if you can believe it or not, Gary is saying that communication is still a challenge, which I refuse to believe because TEFCA was rolled out at the beginning of the year, and Tom Price promised us that that this would be resolved. I couldn't even do it with a straight face.
No,
go ahead.
No, please. Listen, I mean, I think people look at IMC as like an anti-regulatory body sometimes because, we tend to have comment on everything. But I mean, things like that would just make our lives so much easier if there was and make the beneficiary experience so much better.
It would. And look, TEFCA has been in the background for a long time and it's been operating and they've been connecting these communication platforms together. And it's like officially live as of I think January 15th, maybe if I'm right, of this year. So I don't know. I'm being facetious, obviously, Gary. Like I believe it or not, I'm an optimist, and I hope for the best. And I do hope that it resolves some of these communication issues between hospital systems. It is kind of crazy to think that like when I go to one doctor and then I switch plans, right? Because like my ACA changes every year nowadays because of cost fluctuations, right? I know we're talking about Medicare, but I go to a new group and they're like, "Hey, who are you? What's going on?" I got to go through like I'm like, well, back in 1989, I fell out of the oak tree, and it's like it's just crazy, and so it is kind of wild. To touch on Farzine's point, I'm going to post this link in the chat just for anybody who wants to read about it. Gary, can you talk about the RHT program at all? Do you have any expertise around that? It's like it was offered by the Big Beautiful Bill. It's like $50 billion over the course of like 4 years, 10 billion up front, and basically it's equally divided money amongst all 50 states, from what I understand. I don't know if it's enough money, but it's called the Rural Health Transition Program, and it's supposed to fund for rural growth. Is that in your wheelhouse at all? Can you talk about that one at all?
Sorry, it's not, but I mean, I had a general understanding of it, and I know that some of the things that we were even looking at is if there was any way to partner with others. So, for example, one of the areas that had potential funding was around communications on the kind of technology front. So the cellular companies, Wi-Fi, because part of the issues in terms of rural care for the United States is in those rural areas, they may not have access to Wi-Fi and technology to be able to assist in terms of navigating healthcare. So I have had conversations with, large cellular companies like AT&T to say, what is your plan around this rural development? Because there might be some type of partnership capabilities where, health plans and technology and things could work together on expansion, knowing that they're tied together in terms of the ability to access care. So while I don't have a depth of understanding around where we are from the US perspective in terms of the program, there are elements that I look at just from a plan view, which is what are the partnership opportunities to help in terms of expanding into these communities, because it's not just one thing. It's the technology, it's the providers, it's the plan availability, it's really the access, if you will, in those markets.
Yeah,
we have. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, please go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Todd, I just shared the link with you. I saw your comment. It's all from CMS. It's from the one big beautiful bill, section 71401. I think that's what it's designed to do. I'm but by no means an expert on the RHT program. But Gary, to some of the points that you bring up, like I live in a pretty rural area myself, and like I grew up in Chicago. I moved from Chicago to South Florida, and now I live in like the middle of the boondocks in PA. Like we are getting our second street light, and it was in the local paper. Okay, like that's where I live now. And Eliza recently had I don't know, just something happened with her neck, and like her arm went numb, and we were like freaking out. We go to our like local hospital, which is a 26-minute drive from where we live, and they're like, listen, we can give you a CAT scan, we could do an MRI, we can do an X-ray, and then we can advise you to drive to Lancaster, which is like the closest big city to us, so that you can actually get like properly diagnosed and get care. And honestly, like I'm not even necessarily, I wouldn't even consider myself like that remote. Like I'm an hour and a half drive, maybe an hour and 45 to Philly. Like that's not even that far away. And even we're struggling just to get care for, it winds up, she's got, like a few like nasty slip discs that are pinching some nerves and whatnot. But like even our local hospital doesn't have access to specialized care like that. I know it's a very narrow view. I would imagine that they could care for if she was having a stroke or a heart attack or something like that. There's probably specialized care for systems like that. But I didn't even think about it from your perspective of simply accessing, information through a cell service.
Right.
Is that so? I guess we're coming up on time, so I'll try to cut it short here. Is it typical for carriers to get involved with groups like cellular providers to try to figure out these other ways, or is this like a special project of yours?
I wouldn't say it's typical, because when I reached out to executives at AT&T, they had not even considered it, and it had not been part of what they were thinking about. They literally were thinking about how they could acquire the real estate they needed for their cellular, what it took in terms of the development, and had no thoughts about who else they could kind of partner with. And we're very intrigued by the idea, because the message around the bill and what it is intended to do and providing access, for Americans, all aligns to not just technology, but health and other elements too. So it was one that was very much of interest to them. I don't think there's others that are kind of thinking of it that way. I kind of look at things like this and say, what are the ways that we can solve it in a faster, more efficient and cost-effective way? And if there's, one entity that's investing, it's a lot slower process. If you have multiple, then you can get more dollars and more focus on, the development and expansion and kind of help each other, if you will. So that was kind of the spirit of the intent. There's more complexity around, some of the way that companies can work together, and particularly in the, cellular space and such. So more than I'll get into here, but that's part of where I would say it creates a little bit more barriers in terms of the execution. But I don't think the concept, the ability to partner in ways to really work with others that help, in terms of the objectives, that part of it doesn't change. That's where I think all of us keeping, innovative, creative thinking around how to solve for what our problems are, and not just look at it within our own four walls, but how can we work much more broadly and more, across the system, the better, because that helps us all.
Yeah, it certainly does. And in the spirit of partnership, we'd encourage anybody who's listening here today who's not a member of the IMC to consider joining us. These are the kind of initiatives and programs and educational opportunities that we were founded to bring to you. And I think that, as you can hear from the quality of conversation with Gary here, we certainly are keyed into some of the best thought leaders and decision makers in this space. So if you're not a member of the IMC, please do consider joining, become part of our weekly forum where you can learn more from people like Gary and others who we bring in on a regular basis to talk about the industry that we're also heavily invested in and that we want to see not just survive, but thrive by doing the right thing. Gary, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I really appreciate it. It just occurred to me that with an 11 o'clock start time on the East Coast, that you being in California had to get up extra early for this one, which we certainly appreciate. Chris, thank you as always for carrying the majority of the burden here as the more informed half of our co-host team. Look forward very much to everybody joining us at the next Voice of the Coalition, which will happen approximately 1 month from today. In the meantime, I hope to see you on the IMC meetings. Everybody, thanks for tuning in and have a great day.
Yep.
Thank you. And Bill and Chris, thanks for having me today too. And thanks to the coalition too for joining us today.
I would encourage all of you to run up to Gary at Medicarians and sing his praises. You'll have to get in line though.
Yes, and please do cite this podcast as a reason for your newfound affection for him. So because we want to get him back for another episode.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate Gary.
Thank you, everyone.